that I strongly disagree with the Supreme Court's Citizens United decision. In my view, a corporation is not a person. In my view, a corporation does not have First Amendment rights to spend as much money as it wants without disclosure on a political campaign. In my view, corporations should not be able to go into their treasuries, spend millions and millions of dollars on a campaign in order to buy elections. I do not believe that is what American democracy is supposed to be about. Make no mistake, the Citizens United ruling has radically changed the nature of our democracy, further tilting the balance of the power toward the rich and the powerful at a time when already the wealthiest people in this country have never had it so good. The billionaire industrialist brothers David and Charles Koch plan to steer more than $200 million, potentially much more, to conservative groups ahead of Election Day 2012. What do we think? Do we think that American democracy is about a couple of wealthy billionaires putting hundreds of millions of dollars into campaigns without disclosure? It's not just taking on Wall Street. Maybe it's taking on the drug companies. Maybe it's taking on the private insurance companies. Maybe it's taking on the military-industrial complex. I am a proud sponsor of a number of bills that would respond to Citizens United and begin to get a handle on the problem, and I'd like to acknowledge them very briefly. One is the Disclose Act, sponsored by Senator Schumer, which would force corporations spending money on campaign ads to disclose their identity, just as candidates have to do. That is a good thing. I support it. Another is the Fair Elections Now Act, sponsored by Senator Durbin, which would move us finally to publicly financed elections. I think that is a very good idea. I support that. Third piece of legislation is a recent resolution for a campaign finance constitutional amendment introduced by Senator Tom Udall of New Mexico that would make it clear that Congress and the states have the authority to write laws to regulate campaign spending across the country and make sure our state and federal elections are about what's right for our democracy. And I support Senator Udall's resolution. But even these excellent pieces of legislation are not enough. Madam President, the Constitution of this country has served us well for more than 200 years. But when the Supreme Court says that for purposes of the First Amendment, corporations are people, that writing checks from the company's bank account is constitutionally protected speech, and that even attempts by the federal government and states to impose reasonable restrictions on campaign ads are unconstitutional, when that occurs, our democracy is in grave danger. Something more needs to be done, something more fundamental and indisputable, something that cannot be turned on its head by a 5-4 Supreme Court decision. We have got to send a constitutional amendment to the states that says, simply and straightforwardly, what everyone except 5 members of the United States Supreme Court seem to understand, and that is corporations are not people. Bank of America is not a person. ExxonMobil is not a person. Madam President, the resolution I am offering today calls for an amendment to be sent to the states that would do just that. It would make perfectly clear, 1, corporations are not persons with equal constitutional rights as real-life, flesh-and-blood human beings. 2, corporations are subject to regulation by the people. 3, corporations may not make campaign contributions, which has been the law of the land for the last century. And 4, Congress and states have the power to regulate campaign finance, as Senator Udall's amendment would also say.